Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I'm Vince Mickens. With many of my shows, I usually have a panel of guests, but occasionally I have the honor and the privilege of, having a aviation icon. And I've got one today who I'm really looking forward to talking to. He's a good friend and colleague and has some amazing accomplishments that you guys are going to hear about. And then we're going to have quite the discussion about advanced air mobility and unmanned aerial systems and all the things related to that, and the subset of urban air mobility and everything, all related to Archer Aviation, who is paving the way. It's one of those companies that's making some real inroads with it. And, the great thing about it is that this industry always has something new that's coming about at some point. And that's actually happening as we speak. And it's got the whole industry excited. I want to welcome Billy Nolen. Billy Nolen, as many of you know, as probably everybody knows, is a former acting FAA administrator. He is now the chief safety officer for Archer Aviation out in California. And they have the Midnight, which is a really exciting eVTOL that is in testing phase and getting ready to make some inroads into what is a rapidly growing industry, as I mentioned. So first, Billy, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Well, thank you, Vince. Thanks for having me on today. I must say it's very much a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
It's an honor to have you, and you have quite the background. It's always funny. You think you know somebody until you read a couple of their bios and dig into their background a little bit, and you go, okay, this guy has done a whole lot of things. And, we've both been in this industry a long time, but gosh,
Yes.
your background, Billy, is just absolutely amazing. So one of the things we've been chatting in pre-show, but one of the things that I'm excited about is how much you have dealt with on the safety side of things, which I think is, as a pilot and a longtime pilot, that's just paramount to me. I mean, there's, you can come up with all kinds of innovative things and do all kinds of innovative flying and things of that nature, but doing it safely and without incident is key. So I can see with your background in particular why Archer Aviation was like, oh, we got to have Billy. Billy's got to have Billy. Are you done with the FAA? Okay, come on over. and that type of things.
Right.
I was thinking of something, and actually my wife is the one that's the reason for the thought. She said, that stuff you're talking about sounds like the Jetsons.
Right.
It's like, yeah, George Jetson and Jane, his wife, and his boy Elroy. Yeah. For those who are young, they're probably going, the who?
Exactly.
Because the Jetsons, I did a little research on it, and the Jetsons actually came out in 1962.
Right.
Now, that's what I call forward thinking.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at, and I went ahead and looked at one of the episodes just to bring back memories, and it's amazing how much I remembered about it. They only created 24 episodes, but it was so creative and so thought-provoking about what the future could hold in terms of basically advanced air mobility and the autonomous aspect of it, these aircraft flying, by themselves and things like that, and the automation. And I was like, okay, because if it came out in 62, that means somebody in the late 50s was developing it.
Right.
Our space program was still in development and in the early stages of it. So it just really, I thought, okay, the Jetson. Yeah, that's kind of the direction we're going in a modern sort of a way. Would you agree with that?
I'd absolutely agree. And so being a child of the 60s and beyond, going back, picking up on your theme around the Jetsons, I can remember, you had the earliest notions of AI to yours, ability to walk outside and there's your, what we call now a version of an eVTOL, speeds George off to work. And you've got other sort of autonomous things happening at the home, right? So, and that degree of forward thinking felt like it sort of, six and seven sort of lost his way. Of course, the space race was on, right? And for anyone who is a student of aviation, you go, wow, when will we ever see it? And if so, when, right? And it'd be years on, but here we are. Here we are, what has long been talked about in the realm of science fiction is today fast becoming science fact. So this is coming to life and it's unfolding right before our very eyes. So I can't think of a more, while we can talk classic aviation and I'm thrilled by it, I can't think of a more exciting time to be in this sector of the market.
I would agree with it. I think this is probably one of the most exciting times really since space exploration began, which was an exciting era that we grew up in, and we were all glued to the TV when the Apollo missions took place and things of that nature. So absolutely. You clearly have a passion for aviation. So take us back to when all of that started. We were talking about, so you're originally from Birmingham, Alabama.
Just outside small town. Yeah.
Just outside of it. And so you were growing up there. So where did aviation come into the picture for you?
Well, again, same thing growing up. No, TV didn't come for a while, at least in our household, right? Working class, blue collar family, working hard. My parents, I had, a brother and four sisters. So, 8 of us. And so you find ways to entertain yourself. And for me, entertaining myself was with my then younger brother, paper airplanes, having fun, but more than that, it was kind of looking out. You'd be outside. I was outside a lot. You'd be outside after school on the weekends. And
that's something that we all used to have to do, right?
Your mom said, okay, go outside.
Get out of the house.
Right. I'll let you know when dinner is ready, right? That kind of thing. So, but anyway,
before dark.
Totally. I would see airplanes and airplanes flying over where I was weren't that far from different airports in and around the Birmingham area, right? And I'd see airplanes. I would hear helicopters that would sort of come up from, I didn't know it at the time, from other military installations, right? Huntsville, you had down at Maxwell and Montgomery, of course, Fort Rucker, Alabama, which was looming large, not as large as when I was a boy, but hearing all that, it's somewhere stuck in my subconscious. And I just developed this love of aviation from then. I kind of set it aside. I was born in Alabama, spent some time in New York. My family migrated to California in the 70s after I graduated from junior high school, went to high school in California. And in high school, I said, I want to go to the Air Force Academy. I want to fly, I want to fly jets. I thought that's going to be, I wound up, didn't do that, right? And I wound up joining the Army out of high school, going to college at night. You and I were talking just before we went live, and I became, joined the Army Warrant Officer program, became a pilot, continued to pursue my education and all of that. And I flew in the Army, in my Army years. I flew helicopters, flew Huey that everybody knows about. I flew the OH-58, the Kiowa. I started out in the little, TH-55. I then moved on to airplanes. I flew the Super King Air and the King Air 90. And I flew for 13 of the 17 years that I was in the Army. I joined American Airlines in 1989 and started out as an engineer on the Boeing 727 and progressed over the course of my career. I was, proceeded to spend the next 26 and a half years at American, retired from American as an international captain on the Boeing 757, 767. I was an executive managing director of corporate safety and regulatory affairs. So this notion for safety, but I'll back up one step. I got my really start in safety, something that sort of stuck with me from day one. It's almost 40 years ago that I went to the Naval Postgraduate School and did their Naval Safety Officer course. And as I said, I was sort of smitten by the idea, how do you make things better? How do you prevent bad things from happening? I would go on to get the Army Safety course at the Army Safety Center on the civilian side, University of Southern California, their safety course, safety management system. So I've been steeped in it. And I was fortunate, Vince, to spend career at American Airlines, at Qantas Airways Group in Sydney, Australia, at WestJet in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And in all of those roles, I was executive in senior roles in safety and overseeing safety at the enterprise level.
Yeah.
I left all that, went to did a quick hiatus for 3 months, joined the FAA as associate administrator for safety. Asked by the secretary and president to move into the role of acting administrator when Steve Dixon announced that he was stepping down, and was fortunate to be able to serve my country once again in such a critical role, leading an agency with 44,000 plus professionals. So it's just been, the arc of my career. I went through that in about 2 minutes, but it was
no. Trust me, we're going to talk about. I was actually thinking, do I go Navy or go Army? Because you did
go Army beat Navy,
but you
right?
did the Navy graduate school program. But I'm a Navy guy, so
Here.
I want to go back to paper airplanes, because you and I were talking about something in terms of young people.
Sure.
And you mentioned something that I think is kind of common. You had an interest in aviation, but you didn't know what you were going to do with it, and you didn't know where to go with it. Yeah. And so it was years after the paper airplanes before you actually started finding some footing and figuring out, okay, I think I can go this route and things like that. And I don't think that's stands out by itself. I think that's actually quite common. And I think even in today's technology and all of the things that kids have available to them, I still hear the conversations about them trying to figure out what they can do in our industry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really critical point to make that you and I have talked about at length, not only today, but in days past, right? We have to move away as a nation from the idea of one initiative after another. Initiatives, as I say, it's like Baskin Robbins, just 31 flavors. This one comes, this one goes, this gains traction, something else, emerges, something else sunset. We really need a very structured way of say, how do we, for those who have this sort of burning passion, or to be able to just introduce them to what are all the capabilities from, yes, everyone thinks of the pilot and folks thinks of, mechanics and engineers, and folks thinks of flight attendants, but there's
the most common thing.
Yeah. Exactly, but there's so many other specialties, from engineers to marketing to finance that makes not only the world of airlines and corporate aviation work, but every other part of the ecosystem, from the FAA to NASA, et cetera.
To Archer Aviation.
To Archer Aviation, which we're going to come to.
Well, advanced air mobility.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Advanced air mobility has opened up a whole bunch of new opportunities. I mean, some of them are traditional engineering and things like that, but then there's all these other aspects of it, and it's high-tech stuff. You're talking about going into autonomous flying and things like that at some point, and that has to integrate with the aviation, with the air traffic control system, which that was in your front yard. So
that's right. That's right. Yeah, and I would say just a quick point on that one. You're absolutely right. I mean, the motto at Archer is to unlock the skies. But I see that even maybe on a deeper level. I'm sure our CEO and founder Adam Goldstein sees on a deeper level as well. It's the ability to unlock our imagination. So as we're thinking now, as you and I talked at the top of the hour, right, about what started with this notion of the Jetsons, is quickly becoming reality, and we're talking about entering in the service in 2025. So we're just a year or so away from this, folks starting to see more and more in the early days, and maybe, a few of these, and then it'll grow in the tens and then hundreds, and then, thousands and multiples of thousands. So, and all of this entire ecosystem, be it, we think of UAS, unmanned aerial system, drones, there are nearly a million drones in the nation's airspace today.
Right.
And if you look out and see what's coming, all of that is opportunities for engineers, is opportunity for pilots, but it's opportunities to connect communities as well. So more than potential, this is really happening. Yeah.
So you, being the former acting administrator at the FAA and before that, the deputy administrator for safety there, you've been able to look at the big picture of a lot of what we talk about every day and are experiencing and dealing with. When you're looking at it in terms of advanced air mobility and how that is evolving, and it seems to be it's the momentum seems to be picking up. I mean, we've been talking about this for a number of years, but now, as you said, It's actually in play.
You're right.
Your midnight there for Archer Aviation is in testing phase and got a
Yes.
an FAA certification for approval for doing that, and is moving forward with that. There are other companies that are in
Yes.
similar positions and things like that. So this ball is rolling
It
and
is.
it's picking up speed.
It is indeed. And I think for what's critical to understand for your audience, Vince, is they're what I call key enablers, right? That have gotten us to this point where, again, I'll mention it time and time again, of course of the hour, moving from science fiction to science fact, right? So number one is the battery. So battery technology has brought us to the point that we can now take Archer's Midnight aircraft, a pilot plus four passengers and their carry-on bags, and be able to fly up to 100 miles at 150 miles per hour. And we know in a lot of cities, right, you may be crawling around at 25 miles an hour. So just begin, you can just think of the
Or 0 miles
possibilities.
per hour.
Or 0 miles per hour for a
The old
long
parking lot
extended
thing.
period of time. That's exactly
Yes.
right. So I tell the story. I was doing a talk in New York and I landed in Newark at 5:30 in the morning. Clear customers, and I was curbside by 6:30. I had a talk to give in Tribeca. I got in my Uber that everybody does millions of times a day, and it took me an hour and 10 minutes to get from Newark to Tribeca. Right now, I could have in midnight. That would have been about a 7 minute flight. Maybe it would have been 10 minutes flight. Right, so you can imagine, right? Who wouldn't
You're
sign
preaching
up
to
for
the
that?
choir with me on that kind of stuff because I've had that happen so many times. And it is
Right.
amazing. I
Yes.
know that one of the areas that, and I try not to jump around here, but we will anyhow. I know that
Sure.
Archer's working, for example, at a Manhattan to New Jersey
Yes.
routing type of a situation.
Right.
I know from recent experience, multiple times, that it's amazing to me that you can drive from Washington, D.C. to
Yes.
New York and get there in probably just under 3 hours,
Exactly.
and then take an hour or more to go through the tunnel and across into Manhattan.
Absolutely.
Just which is a really, if you look at it on the map, it's a very short distance, but gosh, it's crazy. So yes,
It's
to be
crazy.
able to do that in 5 or 10 minutes,
Right.
and do it with ease and that type of thing. I could tell stories about LA, and we all know about the 405 and all the other freeways
Yeah.
there. And, as a pilot, I actually would do things like fly from Torrance Airport on the south side up
Uh-huh.
to Santa Monica or Van Nuys or Burbank, just to avoid that hour and a half of traffic, and do that flight
Exactly.
in 15 minutes.
That's right. And so if you think, I mentioned the batteries, the next one is just kind of having, going back to the story, right? Is let's imagine a world in which you can have something that contributes to, zero emissions. So it's fully sustainable. It is fully accessible to every sector of the market. This isn't something that we will see, some may think is the purview of the rich or the well-off, well-heeled, right? It is, and that ability to bring a product like Midnight to market, again, that unlocks the skies and unlocks possibilities for travelers. You look at our cities, are they getting any less congested? No, they're even more
Not at
congested
all.
than
They're
before.
getting worse.
They're getting worse, right? So our ability to contribute to that, you make a good point. I mean, we both talked about it. I live in Potomac, Maryland, and I'll look at the day when I used to go to my office at the FAA. I could, depending on what time I left home, that was either 20 minutes or 45 minutes and even longer. I was typically in the
Absolutely.
office about 6:30, 7
Same
in the
thing
morning.
going to the
Right?
MBAA. It's same. Going
Absolutely.
downtown could be a 20
Yeah,
minute or 25-minute drive, or it could be almost an hour, which is just mind
exactly.
blowing.
Yes.
What I was thinking about, Billy, when I was talking about your overview too, is did you ever think, as you were running the FAA, that one day you might actually work in advanced air mobility for a firm for a company like Archer Aviation?
No, not in the initial stages at all. In fact, when I came to the FAA, and I felt when I was asked by the president and secretary, I had I had three overarching goals in my mind, even as the associate administrator for aviation safety, but certainly as administrator. Number one was the continued advancement of aviation safety management systems, something I have been passionate about across the arc of my career for the last 4 decades. Number two was a continuation of America's global leadership around the world. We have been the de facto gold standard, and to see that continue when it comes to regulation, when a safety regulation, certification, how far we come in reducing the fatality risk for commercial aviation. And then lastly, I said, no, how do we enable the future? So I had in mind to think about how do we unlock this, what people are calling this new and novel sector of our global aerospace system with eVTOLs and even drones, right? And I say, if we can do this, then you know what? Our leadership is sealed for decades to come, something that lives on beyond us. And so that was kind of my model. And as I was thinking through it, I had many opportunities. I got many calls. I still get many calls. And as I was, decided that I was ready for my family, that it was time for me to sort of step away. I felt good, nearly 20 years of public service between the FAA and the military. I sort of looked around and thought, about a lot of things. I had an opportunity to look at a lot of companies, and I really liked what I saw. All of them are good, but I really liked what I saw at Archer. I love the buzz. I love the vision of our CEO and founder, Adam Goldstein. I love what our people represented. It was, it's a deep bench with very experienced people from Tesla and Apple and others and Google and Uber Elevate. So I thought, okay, this is a place, I felt the energy, I felt the vibe, saw a viable path to market, because that's really critical. One thing I've said a lot in the past is you can go to any aviation museum and all of them have some concept of model that never made it to commercialization.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
You say, well, that's a cool design.
That's a cool really concept, great point.
But no one ever has ever flown it other than a test pilot, right? So you really need something about market, about bringing a product to market. And that's one of the key reasons that appealed to me about joining Archer.
So, you were at the Global Aerospace Summit, which I attended, and you guys had the midnight there, which was awesome. As a matter of fact, I had to get out of your way because I was bugging because I wanted to know everything about it, and I sat in it, and I inspected it like I was doing a pre-flight, and
I noticed that.
So, but I was also impressed and pretty amazed with the things that Archer has thought of in terms of, passenger comfort and convenience, the technology, just everything. The fact that the efficiency of the blade of the rotors, and how that as an eVTOL is very quiet in terms of it when it's flying and things like that. So seeing all of that, and me personally witnessing and getting the personal tour from you, what was it like for you when you guys moved into testing phase?
Yeah, when you move into testing phase, look, one of the things that I think one of the defining differences between Archer and say others in the market, and there's a lot of folks, right? A lot of concepts in the pipeline, in the regulatory pipeline, right? But the things again that drew me was, many people will design an aircraft or concept or whatever, and then go in search of a market case to use that design. Ours was different, right? We decided to say, what's what part of the market? What's the outcome? What do we want to serve? Then how do we go build, architect, and design an aircraft that meets that outcome that we want to achieve? So sort of like, the Stephen R. Covey habits of highly effective people, right? Is begin with the end in mind. So that's really what informed you to go look back to our CEO and founder, Adam Goldstein. You look at our engineers and our CEO, Tom Muniz and Jeff Bauer, right? It's beginning with that outcome in mind. And so that's helped us, get, on our journey to certification and our journey to commercialization. That's what we kind of think through, and so as we go, and just the other day of seeing, we've been flying Maker for a long time now. And having midnight flying to take flight, first starting in the hover phase, and we will continue to advance. Our team will continue to advance the profile through all of that. And as we march to certification, we're in the process of building 6, conforming aircraft, one of which, will go to the Air Force for FWORK for testing. You're
getting validation.
Absolutely.
The DoD, the Air Force is you guys have struck a deal with them. The UAE, you guys
Yeah.
recently have been working with them,
Yes.
and they're really looking forward to it. And they're very forward thinkers. So anything that's modern and
Well,
and and jet steady,
I will tell you, yeah,
right up their
that's right.
alley.
It is, and I'll tell anybody if I know you've been right, and the Dubai Air Show is coming up here in just under 10 days, right, starting on the
Right.
13th. Is that what I would say? If you have not wanted a must see for me, and I've been there, with my wife, is the Museum of the Future, and you look at the vision there that says I find it laughable, not laughable in a bad way, but in a good way, because they imagine a world of 2070. I said 2070, this is happening in 2025, 2026, right?
Right.
So at least
Exactly.
the kind of the first phase of it, but I appreciated the vision that you're seeing. It is very forward thinking. It is forward thinking in terms of how do we have a strong regulatory framework? How do we enable this sector of the market and be seen as a catalyst versus impediment? I talk a lot about my safety background, but there's a couple of ways to think of safety. One could think of safety in a way that says, oh, it's safety. And that becomes, okay, stop the presses, everything halts because safety. And you see it as either, as we can't do X or Y versus say there is safety, but see safety as a catalyst and say, what must I see? What do we need to see as a regulator, as a company, or to the flying public to ensure that this will be safe? So we've architected, Midnight is a vehicle that has zero single points of failure. When you think about it, now I have nearly 4,000 hours in helicopters and thousands of hours in commercial airliners, right? So when you think about that, that means a lot. My Army days of flying a UH-1, a Huey, as everybody know it, you've got a two-bladed rotor and a two-bladed tail rotor, main rotor, right? Either one of those failed, you're kind of up a creek there, right? But now you have a vehicle that's got 12 propellers that is architected in the ways with redundancies and multiple redundancies built in the same way with our batteries. You've got, 6 battery packs that are supported, again, architected in ways so that you don't have any single points of failure. This is how far not only technology has come, automation has come, and all of that allows us to bring a vehicle to market that will be, what I say, once it's certified by the FAA and validated by others, will be as safe as climbing aboard a Boeing 787-900 or an Airbus A350-900. I'll just use those as kind of proxies, right? We really have come a long way in providing levels of safety, levels of accessibility, levels of sustainability, and everything else we kind of think of in this space. And this is really what the flying public has come to expect and will continue to expect.
Yeah. So your Midnight aircraft right now is set up to take 4 passengers
Yes.
and it's piloted. At some point, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are eventually moving towards autonomous flight. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into that, and maybe you can share that with us in terms of your perspective and how that's going to transition into the future, the near future, actually.
That's right. It's an excellent point, Vince, for both of us and for the audience at large, right? You think about it, right? Everything is about building that safe. First you got to build a safety case, and that's where certification comes in. Then you got to build the public acceptance or a comfort and confidence phase, right? So we
Right.
think the way to do this, right? Let's start out with a pilot model. If we continue to build, we're collecting lots of data, and as we grow that, and you know what, it may not be, maybe it's 1 year, 2. Who knows what that time will be? We'll do it when it's right. But we've got good partners out there with Boeing. We've got folks who are going down this fully autonomous space. We just think the right space for us to be in is to start with that piloted model. It provides that level of comfort and trust to the flying public, and they will see, as you see more and more of these. Now, people don't think about it. The universe of helicopters globally is around 50,000. And most people don't give it, other than the noise, they don't give it a second thought to say, is it safe or not, right? It's been certified, it's certified to safe. But it also has many, many, many multiples of single points of failure. So now that as we start to do this, and as we have the level of interaction with communities, with cities, with stakeholders, both at the federal and both public and the private level, you will come to see that we really have brought this to a phase and will continue to grow our system that we can indeed bring something that is super safe, that will absolutely, and I believe mind-blowingly change the way we think about flying and moving around.
Yeah, so it's a whole new world that's opening up with it.
It
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
kind of going back a little bit and talking about the opportunities in the industry and things like
Yes.
that, and where that's leading to. I think one of the things that I like to point out, I know one of the things I like to point out on my shows is to let the young people know you never quite know what your path is going to be. So if you
Right.
think about it, if we go back and look at your career, you went Army pilot,
Yes.
you went from, and I wanted to ask you about that because you went from helicopter to fixed wing. How did that transition happen before I continue with what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that's a great one. Of course, the Army, the bulk of the Army, pilots are rotary or helicopter pilots, right? Just
Right,
because that's the universe of how the Army operates, but it also has
right.
quite a significant number of fixed wing aircraft. In the Army, at the time that I did it, they picked about 50 guys a year, 50, when I say guys and gals a year. And so it was a very competitive process. At the time, I was in Korea in the Second Infantry Division flying helicopters. I was also the safety officer for the helicopter outfit I was in, and I submitted my application to the Army. It was a very competitive, process for picking who would go to fixed wing school that year, and I was fortunate and blessed to get a fixed wing slot. And that the rest, as they say, is history. This
This
was
history, yeah.
1985, 1986, and from there I went to Langley Air Force Base and was flying in a executive detachment there. And from there, on to American Airlines. The transition was
You
easy.
got the good duty, you got the VIP duty.
I, well, I
Yeah,
certainly
I'm
served
sure
my
your
country
wife
well.
probably liked that. No,
Yeah, well, I've been a buffer DMZ pilot. I've been independent on multiples of times. So I spent more than my fair share of flying in Korea and absolutely loved every minute of it. Right. So it was a wonderful the last duty I had before becoming an airline pilot with American, and I still flew for another 3 years in the U.S. Army Reserve. So and that was a
to take
wonderful
advantage
opportunity.
of having you on and ask you this question because
Yeah.
I hear a lot of chatter about it, and I'm curious about your experience and opinion with it. Transitioning from being a military pilot to a
Yeah.
civilian pilot, and
It's,
you know,
mhm.
go ahead.
Well, it's interesting there during my at the time that I did American, it was what they call a three-phase interview. Phase one, you came in, you did a little mini medical, you did a few tests, the battery tests and stuff like that to give you a quick overview. That was a big kind of screen out process, right? It says you made it through that one. The next one was a little bit longer interview. You did a major medical, another one, and then if you made it through round two, you got to round three. You did your simulator ride, and you did what they call a captain's board. And so came in, did my simulator ride. I did my captain's board. The first question I got said, "Oh, so Billy, yeah, okay, you've been a military pilot for all these years. Yeah, who's been paying your salary?" And this was the question. I said, well, of course, the American public is paying. This this guy says, yes, you're right. And says, okay, you're here at American's paying salary. I says, without missing us as well. Of course, it's our passengers. It's the passengers. Because it's okay. Of course, our crew never forget that. That
Mm.
who's going to. But it gave you a sense. But that the transition from the military, very structured, very focused, very as detail oriented, and coming to the airline, certainly American, I found exactly the same kind of environment around decision making, around there was overarching. This is before the days of SMS, but you had other, obviously safety models in place at that time, right? But it was equally structured because so many, I would say at the time that I joined American Airlines, probably 75 to 80% of American Airlines pilots at the time, I'm sure it was the same at Delta, at the time Continental and United, were military. They were typically they were Air Force, Navy, Marines, and the
Right,
Marines and Army sort of brought up the rear just because you had a lot of rotary wing guys coming
right.
from those two services, right? But what you found yourself is having a similar structure at the majors, right? Most of them, their leadership teams, their training teams were all sort of model on military training in terms of what they provided, right? So I found the structure and then my foundational training at the military was another key to my success. But we're also seeing universities pick up. They've long since picked up on that, and they're offering it. And with the advancement of safety management systems and human factors training that didn't exist in my early days in the way
Right.
that it does now. So all of these things have contributed to not only incredible level of safety that we enjoy in commercial aviation, especially Part 121 and Part 135, right? It's because of the advancement in aviation safety system. It's because of the advancements in simulation, that level of experience, and that what companies are doing today. And if we think about projecting to the future, as you and I said earlier on the show, is as we think of young people and getting them more involved, we have the ability now, Vince, to inculcate people, to train them at an early age. What does it mean? The greatest thing that we can teach professionals today is proper decision making, right? Because you will find
Right.
yourself thunderstorm. You fly all the time. You got a thunderstorm up ahead. You got convective weather there. You got this there. You got something happening. You got strong crosswind. You got all these sort of external things you're dealing with. And what is your ability to make good decisions in the moment for yourself and for your passengers, or for yourself if you're out flying in general aviation, right? And that ability to make good decisions is the key to safety. And it's the key to this, as this new and novel sector comes to fruition in the next
Yeah.
year or so. Yeah.
I'll be even more blunt about it. I think that's really critical. And I think this is the way I put it. If I'm up at front and I'm flying and there's a situation where it's a go or no go decision based on weather or other conditions or things like that, or maybe even something with the aircraft, there's nobody in the back that's going to pressure me to take that flight if it's not
No,
safe to do so. As I
exactly.
always like to say, you can fire me because at least I'll be
Yeah.
alive to
Right.
find another job. So, and you'll be alive because I decided not to go.
That's
So,
right.
but
Oh,
I think that that's really critical. While we were talking about being a military pilot, being a
yeah.
civil pilot, specifically airline, and of course, you and I talked about a lot of the other areas that are also available to fly, such as
Hmm.
business aviation. There's cargo. Actually, cargo's a pretty great gig.
Yes.
A
All of
lot
them
of
are
people
great
don't
gigs these
realize
days.
that's
I've
good
got
flying, good money, pretty
yes, it
steady in
is.
terms of your hours and everything because
Absolutely.
you fly the same thing and that
Sure.
type of thing. But I want to circle towards or move towards flying something like the Midnight.
Yes.
What are the qualifications? Because it's kind of unique.
It is.
It's not a helicopter,
Yeah.
but it's also not an airplane. So what do you guys look at that as you're developing?
Yeah.
We're having
So we
pilots
talk
fly
exactly. So we talked a bit. I kind of touched on to the two of what I call the key enablers, and you've really, thank you for this because it lands us on the third one, right? So the first one, what the battery technology has brought us away, is number two to have a definitive certification pathway that we're all marching down. Number three, you needed an operational rule set, right, for something that again new and novel. The FAA initially started out down a path on a FAR Part 23, 2117A, which could be an airplane or a helicopter with a special conditions rating. And then they sort of thought through that and says didn't quite fit the bill. So really then, settled on 2117B and using the category of powered lift. What does it mean? You got something takes off like a helicopter, flies like an airplane, lands like a helicopter. Now, let me just stop and say there are eVTOL models out there that have no wing. So they're purely sort of in a helicopter mode, if you will, the entirety of their time that they're flying, right? Sort of like a
right.
rotor. A rotor doesn't, the wing doesn't stop. I mean, the rotor doesn't stop, and you can now sort of glide like you don't have that capability. So
Right.
using what the FAA calls powered lift and what EASA calls the European Aviation Safety Agency calls special conditions, essentially the same, right? Something that's new and novel. So the FAA has they drafted a rule set, they put it out for public comment, they've got those comments back, they're working through those, and they will finalize it. We expect them to finalize that rule by, fall of next year. which kind of comports to our timeline of our entry in the service in the 2025, with our certification, et cetera. So this is something. So you asked the question. They're still working through that. I think initially the idea
Okay.
is it 100 hours over and above being a commercial pilot. So that once that's finalized, and then the industry will absolutely have a concerted, definitive pathway for what kind of time and experience that the pilots will need who will be flying midnight. But let me just say, for young people out there, other people doesn't have to just be young, right? We believe that midnight in aircraft and eVTOLs like this, right, will offer another opportunity for tomorrow's pilots. Now, you remember I said I got my flying in the Army. A lot of people go out and they'll get a Robinson R-22 Type rating. It's probably one of, if you're on a
Right.
cheap air, and not that it's a cheap airplane, it's a great helicopter, right? But you kind of look at that, we know what the cost is. So now here's another pathway for how we help, contribute to growing the number of pilots that we have and that we'll need far into the future. You imagine a world if
Wow.
we can go and replicate or be able to say supplant the 50,000 sort of noisy helicopter unit, you've got something that's all electric, 100 times, nearly 100 times less noisy than a conventional helicopter, zero emissions, fully accessible, right? That's a new enough. We think, number one, it will be another area of interest for America's youth and for the youth around the world. But certainly when we're talking about America, for America's youth, here's another avenue of how someone might get into the flying business and then could use that in as a springboard to the airlines or to, corporate flying, et cetera. So this gives us not only is it a lot of hope, we think it's a great pathway for America's youth.
Yeah, that sounds actually pretty exciting. When you're as you're working through this, one of the things we talked about a little earlier are the importance of the aviation associations,
Yes.
the NBAA and the GAMAs and the
Yeah.
EAA and things like that. As a matter of fact, we were talking about EAA and talking about Oshkosh, and
Yes.
it's one of those places where you're going to see a little bit of, not a little bit, a whole lot of everything that has to do with flying,
Right.
and aircraft that you go, oh, that flies? Okay. If you
Yeah.
say so. but also that in particularly in recent years has
Yeah.
been demonstrating how aviation is advancing,
Yes.
and all of the type of different types of advancements in aviation. From your overview and from the positions that you've been in, what's your perspective on that?
I agree. People will go to people will go to Burning Man, Coachella, and all of and those are all great things to do. And if you're a motorcyclist, people do a pilgrimage to Sturgis, because it's pretty cool, sort of like-minded. But I got to tell you, if you have any interest whatsoever in aviation, you owe it to yourself and to your family, to your kids, to make it
At least one
at
time.
least once, because you make one, you're going to be hooked. I'm just going to say,
Right.
you're talking about descending on Oshkosh, just outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 10,000 aircraft in one place. I was there in my role as the FAA administrator last year, right? And I got there, and the guy said, let's go on a little tour. I drove literally, Vincent, 5 miles. 5 miles of wingtip to wingtip airplanes. Now think of that, where you can go and drive
Right.
5 miles, and so you got
Yeah.
to your point, every permutation. So, and I take my hat off to NBAA and to Gamma and to EAA and to AOPA and every other sort of, if you want to say alphabet soup when it comes to association, because in one place you have America's best, not just American, but really you have the very best and the newest on display. And you got a lot of ancient stuff too, in a good way. And all of it's flying. And I was there and there was nearly 675,000 people across the course of the week that I was there. So you think of that. So it's a major draw. And for aviation and for aviation geeks, I cannot tell you a better venue that I've been to. And I have been to Singapore Air Show. I've been to Farnborough, Le Bourget. I'm headed to
Exactly.
Dubai. It's the way to go. And if you think about it, it's a pretty cool event to attend.
Well, and a lot of what you see there, the aviation technology,
Yes.
you see they're working on engines and showing you how to take apart,
That's
different
right.
types of engines and turbofans and the whole bit and things like that,
Yes.
or how to build a wing or how to build a propeller or how to
Yes.
you know just everything that you can think of, which again brings it back to, so this is the bottom line to me, and this applies to a lot of what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Whatever your skill set is, it probably applies somewhere in aviation.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
for me to talk with a student who was about to graduate, at the time was about to graduate from the Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics, 2-year program, A&P license, got certified by the FAA for the A&P,
Yeah.
and got picked up by SpaceX.
Right.
Who would think SpaceX was hiring mechanics?
Totally.
Generally you think of, when you think of SpaceX and all of the other, Blue Origin, et cetera,
Yeah.
you're in NASA, you're thinking aerospace engineering degree or something along those lines. You're not thinking,
Yeah.
oh, well, I have mechanical skills and so
Yeah.
that's what I want to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not thinking of it that in that realm. So, I think I can't overemphasize that, which I'm going to circle back to Archer Aviation,
Sure.
because as I was mentioning to you before we got started, I got a LinkedIn from Archer saying that they had 3 positions open for hire. So I clicked on the link, and then it went to the career site at Archer, and there were dozens of positions,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
it was everything. Where's my notes? It was everything from engineering to systems type of
Software. That's
things and
yes.
software. Exactly, there it is.
Yeah.
Staff systems engineer, flight test engineer, senior manager of supply chain systems. The
Yes.
supply stuff. Hey, somebody's got to keep track of that stuff, etc.
Absolutely.
And that's just a small smidget of it, but lots of opportunities. And this is just one company. This is Archer
Right.
Aviation, and yes, very progressive, and you guys are doing great things. And look at all the opportunities just in that one company.
Exactly. And what I would say to anyone out there it doesn't just have to be, for example, in aeronautical engineering or some other form. We have folks who've worked at Tesla before. I'm a big fan of these brilliant innovators, be it Elon or Jeff Bezos or Sir Richard Branson, right? Because this idea of thinking about what is the art of what I love to say, one of my favorite phrases, what is the art of the possible? And you just got to you have to ask yourself the question, what if? And so I'd say the same to someone who is sitting in university today and wondering, where do I go next? Or they're even sitting in junior high school today and contemplating, hey, what do I want to do with my life? Oh, aerospace, aviation. I could go and occupy Mars, but that's a ways off. Before we get to Mars, come to Archer is what I would say. And you will find, and what we are looking for, and I think everybody's the same. We're looking for people who are passionate, who have an all-in mentality that says, I want to go make a difference and I want to be part of an organization, of a company that's really changing the future. And it's a global phenomenon. It really, really is. And this is what I would say. I want to leave it. I was like, this is America, what I call Americans' version of the space race when it comes to advanced air mobility, UAS. We can choose to lean into the moment. We can choose to own it as a nation, our leadership, etc. And it will be something amazing. I look back, I go back to the arc of my career making paper airplanes in Alabama to here I am, right, from the airlines, and here I am to the very future for everything else that's to come. I've been a pretty blessed person, I just got to tell you, and you have too, because we've talked a lot about both of our careers here, right? But I
Right.
offer that up as a way, even if just a small bit of inspiration that says, go, see it. It is here. It's happening. Come be a part of it.
So from from paper airplanes and the Jetsons
Yeah.
to advanced air mobility and everything that's happening now. Um, you touched on something, and it stuck with me, and that's about the public perception and the public's acceptance
Yes.
of such new technology, and like anything. But if people think about it, there was a time when flying from one city to another was
Yeah.
novel,
Right.
something we take for granted now, going from one part of the country to the other in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
is kind of a given. Being able to go from here to Europe in 8 hours, or from here to
Right.
China, I don't know, 14 or whatever hours, I can't remember what it
Right.
is. But and actually being on another part of this planet in short
Yeah.
order is a given.
Yeah.
The
I agree.
advanced air, go ahead.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, please.
I was just going to say the advanced air mobility and urban air mobility and the whole thing of being able to bounce around cities, or even between small cities that are fairly close to each other. We can use the Washington, the DMV, as everybody likes to call it, the District, Maryland, Virginia area.
Yeah.
You can do all kinds of stuff with that.
Absolutely.
You can bounce all over the 3 states, the 2 states in the district, with ease, and eventually that's going to be a norm. So
it's going to be,
again, you having the overview, you having done what you've done with the FAA, share your thoughts about that in terms of what the public is probably looking at and thinking about.
Yeah. So let's just use here. This is the hometown for both you and I, right here in the the metropolitan area of Washington, the district, and Maryland and Virginia, right? So when I think about all of that, right, and I've flown out of all 3 airports, right, Baltimore. And yes, we tout the convenience of Reagan DCA, but it has restrictions there associated with. But think in not too long, in the very near future, that ability to say get from Reagan to Dulles and be able to do that in 10 minutes versus 35, 45, or even longer, depending on the time of day you're on 66, right? Or to get up to Baltimore, Washington, that could be an hour plus, right, on the Beltway. And so that ability to do that. So as we start unlocking that, I mean, when you imagine, you said it earlier, right? There are times it takes you 3 hours intra-cities. We've all been stuck on the Beltway. We've all been stuck in Manhattan or in LA and places like that are just hours on end of sort of wasted productivity. And our ability to go unlock, well, we unlock it all? No. But if you think about it, right, the uptake in EV usage, the folks who are buying Teslas and GMs and Fords and Rivian and everything else, we're starting to see that level of uptake. Of course, we need the infrastructure to come along with it. And so what I would say on the public policy side to congressional leaders and government leaders is we need to change the narrative because today we'll talk about surface transportation. We'll talk about air transportation. I want to change. I've created a new term, call it omni transportation. So when we think of electrification, we think of how surface connects to air and vice versa, right? This is the kind of, when we think about it at a national policy level, we've got to think about how we truly enable the future. And whether that be at the city government level, it's great to look out and see those forward-leaning governors, those forward-leaning mayors, right? And regional authorities. But it is all of us coming together that say, again, our version of the space race. We can either win it. I'll go back to China, maybe something in the front part. And so China just a few weeks ago certified their EHang 216 as a fully autonomous eVTOL that carries 2 people. Maybe we're not quite ready for that, but we don't want to wake up one day and we've ceded all leadership, right? That says we could have done all of that here, right? So let's make sure. That's why I say safety is a catalyst, not a crutch. We see what are the things that we need to see. Let's continue to work it. We got brilliant minds, FAA, DOT, in the White House, at NASA, right? It is bringing all that, and I'll have to give a point of praise to the White House and to the president, right? They stood up the interagency working group, or the IWG, with the express remit to go out and say, how do we make all this happen? How do we bring it together? How do we eliminate the impediments and sort of the siloed effect between different governmental agencies? And let's move as one that says, America's best days are ahead of it, not behind, and that we're not going to lose any ground to anywhere else in the world. And that's not taking anything away from them, but this is a space that we used to just own, right? And we just need to make sure that we continue to own it in terms of our national leadership.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, I do not want to miss the opportunity to talk about your new manufacturing facility that is being built in the Atlanta area. I used to fly in Atlanta and live in Atlanta, so I know that airspace down there really well, and I think it's really exciting that Archer has chosen that area for your manufacturing facility. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the things again, going back to design, we said begin with the end in mind, right? But what that also meant is that we made a conscious decision. And certainly Adam and executive made a conscious decision. Let's work with top tier suppliers. We didn't, was no reason we're going to sort of do it all ourselves. There are a billion people. So we're partnering with folks like, Honeywell and Garmin and Safran, right? In terms of, the equipment we have on our airplanes and some of the systems. At the same time, one of our biggest partners, United Airlines, with their level of commitment and trust and faith in Archer. We partner with Stellantis. So Stellantis is our major partner, one of the world's largest automobile manufacturers, is going to help us in this regard. So we are building this facility just to the east of Atlanta in Covington, Georgia, right? In their phase one, roughly 650 airplanes with the ability to scale that up to, 2,000 plus a year or so as demand continues to grow. So we're very excited. The leadership, we've appreciated the leadership.
You're going to be hiring people in that market?
Yeah. Absolutely. Governor Kemp has just been a stalwart supporter. Senator Warnock has been a stalwart supporter of the entire, Georgia delegation. So we've had this level of interaction for folks who see the vision, like-minded, and said, let's go make something happen. And, the Atlanta area is an exciting place and part of the country. And this is an opportunity, again, for America's youth and others with those skill sets, right? We are excited for what it means for Georgia, what it means for Archer Aviation, and what it means for America.
Yeah, and you're putting Covington Airport on the map.
Here. Not a bad thing, my friend. Not a bad thing at all.
Not a bad thing at all. I think it's great though that you guys are doing that, and it just shows. And you just mentioned something that's really key to the collaboration, the different partners that you guys are collaborating with that are not necessarily aviation, but they have certain things technology wise that make a lot of sense for what you guys are doing. So and the fact that you guys are open-minded with that and realize how important that is to help you achieve your ultimate goals.
Yeah, that's right. And I have to take a moment to give a shout out to one of our, key executive, Tasha Perkins, who is also our chief people officer, very forward-leaning, in charge of our partnerships as well. She's done some incredible work. Spent a lot of time in the Middle East as well, right? So it's just having, a strong executive bench that are out looking for these. How do we reach out? How do we touch base with some very forward-thinking leaders around the country? Certainly Georgia rings large, and what we're doing in California, so much talent there in Silicon Valley, what we're doing around the world, what we're doing here in Washington, right? And we appreciate, it's the opportunity for me to come on a great show with a person I really admire and talk about not only all the things he's doing, but just, this passion that we both hold dear around aviation.
Yeah, thank you so much. On that note, we're going to have to, first of all, thank you. I appreciate the comment. I'm the one that's honored to have you on my show. So, but I always like to let the person, the guest have the last word. So any final words or comments or thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, you and I were together last year, and we were together in Orlando, an NBA conference. You had General Bolden and a couple other guys there. Great event. I was struck then, as I've always been struck by, not only your passion for the industry, your passion for this thing around, as you said, how do we think about giving back to America's future? And for me, that's what it's about. I mean, I want, as I say, if this is the last third of my sort of, physical life, whatever time God gives me, right? It is about how we enable the future. And it means a lot to me and to be in a country where all of that is possible. And so we look for like places around the world. But this opportunity to reach out to America's youth and say, you can be a part of really bringing this all to reality, come be a part of it. This is fantastic stuff. And I got to say, it's been such a thrill being on with you today. And I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm really excited about it too. And we're at a point, as we've said many times, we're at a point in our industry right now. It's just blossoming. Yes. In so many different ways. It's growing exponentially. On the space exploration side, that's a whole nother, realm there. But coming back to, the advanced air mobility and the emphasis on that, and it's going to be quite the industry as it grows. So the opportunities are wide open, and we hope that the next generation pays attention to that. And we want to also give them some incentive to,
Here,
go
here.
after it, because
I agree.
they say it all the time. It sounds kind of corny, but the sky is pretty much the limit.
It pretty much is. Yeah. Well, and beyond. So I'm still in sort of
Exactly.
a Buzz Light to infinity and beyond, right? It's just,
Exactly.
it will just continue to grow. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I know I'm going to see you at all the major aviation events and
Yeah.
things like that, but I am looking forward to an opportunity for two things. So I'm going to put it
Yes.
out there. When I'm in Northern California,
Here, here.
I want to come to San Jose
Standing
to your
invitation.
headquarters,
Yes.
and check out what you guys are doing there. And then it's going to be really exciting when you guys open up the new manufacturing facility next year in Covington, Georgia, there in Atlanta. So
love to have you along.
Look forward to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Billy. It's really great. You've had an amazing career, and you're still, as they say, kicking butt and taking names. Real proud of you and excited for you. And I think what you're doing with Archer and what Archer Aviation is doing as part of the advanced air mobility industry is phenomenal, and just looking forward to seeing that continue. So hats off to everybody there, the team there. Hats off to you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And particularly on the safety front, that's key for all of us that like being up in the air more than on the ground.
I agree. Thank you very much. Thanks, Vince. Thanks for having me on today.
Sounds good. Thank you. So you take care of yourself, and we will talk soon. And for all of you who are watching and listening to All Things Aviation and Aerospace, it is a video webcast and an audio podcast presentation of the Private Air Media Group. It is available to watch later on demand via my Private Air Media YouTube channel, Facebook page, and LinkedIn page. Also, podcast audio version is available, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And as we say in broadcasting, to find out more, well, you have to tune in next week. In the meantime, please take care. Stay safe. Safe flying if you're a pilot like me, and blue skies. Oh, and Billy, thanks for serving. All the best.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great one, everybody.
Thank you.